I welcome you all to this webinar, 6th webinar, that is 12th of October and not November as it says on this slide. But we are up to full speed, so maybe we are running too quickly, I don't know. For those of you that have listened to this before, been attending these webinars, we have this EOSC Governance Development Forum. And for newcomers, I would like to tell that we do this in a monthly, fairly regular pace to enable stakeholders to contribute to the governance development and having a platform for the information dialogue and development we do around governance in the European Open Science Cloud pilot project. You will find us on the web where you can find all the material and previous meetings and information about how it is going with the governance development. Today we will focus, we have talked previously about the work with the governance framework. A part of this includes principles of engagement, which means that how to, for both service providers and users, how to engage with what we believe is the European Open Science Cloud. What are the various principles that need to be applied and requested. And we have a task in this governance work package that are addressing this, and it's led by Andrew Smith, Elixir, who have prepared some material on this here that I will present for you today. And Andrew have unfortunately to excuse himself. But let's take a look on this and see what we have there. This work, it is a few people that have contributed here specifically to this slide and the work, and there are more people behind, of course, the work. And we expect there will be a EOSC rules of engagement deliverable, and that is not due until July, August 2018. We will have a draft now in November this year. So this is really work in progress. So there are really, we are very keen on getting some input, and that's also why we present this here today. And there are this kind of the principles of engagement, the work here, it also interfaces to other activities in the EOSCpilot. The preparatory work for business model to underpin EOSC sustainability, the EOSC federated service management framework, and of course general policies for EOSC. And first one have to look into understanding what are the barriers to participate. If we now have a big infrastructure with various different services, and that could be presented under an EOSC umbrella, there are of course a number of barriers for participating. And what have been looked into here is of course the legal, ethical, financial and organizational barriers. And there is a need then of course to find a balance between the needs of users, of service providers, and the capabilities of the users and service providers, and also find rules of engagement and recommendations that fit the collective vision of EOSC, that it's really not a monolithic thing where rules can just be set and you have to follow, but it's really a collective effort with a lot of providers and a lot of different users. And so the first question that comes up here, of course, is how high do we want to set the barrier to participation? Because if one set it high, we get a small number of potential service providers and supposedly also users. If it's low, then it's something that is open for everything, and there is a lot of question mark around this also. How do we guarantee quality and all aspects of SLAs and so on? So there is you can't just, there must be something. And likely model then can be that it is mixed or tiered. Then it depends on the type of services and what it should be clear then also for the user, what type of services and what can be expected of one particular service. So some of the steps that have been taken what have been going on in the work here. So there have been a wide but shallow review of 20 potential service providers that have been selected just based on their public documentation. What do they say themselves about themselves in public? And so there have been a number of e-infrastructure, domain-specific research infrastructures, including a number of S3s and Aeroforum organizations. And the Aeroforum organizations here, they are among those you find CERN, EMBL, ESA, and so on. Typically the intergovernmental organizations. There have also been looked upon what large commercial vendors do. For example, Amazon Web Services, I think that they have been looked into. And other initiatives here bound by some charter of some sort. And then in addition to this wide and shallow review, there have been a deeper analysis of 7 potential service providers. So the direct interview with service providers that we know are really in the core here because already involvement in the EOSCpilot or already providing services in forthcoming or plan to provide services in the forthcoming EOS Hub project. So for EGI, Praise, EUDAT, and OpenAir, there have been Elixir and CDataNet, and then Amazon Web Services also among these that have been checked a bit more carefully. So the questions that have been asked here to the service providers, or type of questions I should say, or from a service provider perspective. So what would be the procedure to include the service provider? Are there minimum criteria to include the service provider, legal, technical, all the different aspects there? And how are these criteria presented so the service provider can understand how to be included here in something? And is there a review of the services or service providers self-declared, and what type of services? And then from the user side, we know that there are, for example, could be obligation of user organization in accessing services, depending on what type of the service provider and under what conditions these services are provided. And then for many of the public providers in services, could be an evaluation process. As a researcher, you have to apply for access to some resource. And also about, of course, if it's more commercial or that applies to some of the public also service providers there, what are the pricing policies and if you have to pay. Some of the findings, and of course one can conclude this in one way, that it's a very inhomogeneous landscape. There is a lot of variation. So we see a lot of variation in the type of services providers, of the services provided, and how they are provided. And there are great variation in organization type and sustainability. Because this is typically, as a user, if you take on start to build something around the service, you are interested in the sustainability of the infrastructure. Of the service, and then we see a large variation here in the sustainability plans also for the infrastructure project, and it could be, I mean, if it is a nationwide service in some country, or if it is just a project sustained setup. It means a lot. There are lots of difference there. And there is a lot of variation in how to integrate service providers, how service providers can be integrated into something new. And it's also great variation in how the service is run by providers and how it is evaluated and monitored. And of course, the pricing policy is different from in many ways. There is variation on rules from the user perspective then. It's of course very great variation in rules users, organizations have to adhere to when set by the providers and also the user organizations. And very great variation, of course, in the way users' requests are evaluated, if there are committed service agreements or no evaluation, or if it is just free for use and so on. So as I said, it can be concluded there is a great variation out there in as could be assumed. We also had brought this topic in a workshop in Tallinn. Oh, sorry. We had a workshop in Tallinn last week where we brought up some of these topics and that relates to governance. So it was a governance development forum as a live workshop then in last week, and principles of engagements with one of the topics there. And some of the input from the discussions there that could add on to this, and then for also other projects that are contributing here. For example, I mean, we have a lot of existing credible services and infrastructures, and there is a project, eInfra Central, so that are designing a framework for an EOSC service catalog. And then we have the forthcoming project will build on interoperability between the infrastructures and research infrastructures, of course. And that will, there will come a lot, we can learn about a lot about the principles of engagement there. Some very specific thing that came out is, of course, if you have data services in some way, or providing data, that the provenance of data is very important for researchers. What is the origin of this data? Can it be how can I understand how well I can trust it, or where can I find the responsible, or where it originates from, and so on. And that is, of course, also going back to these principles of engagement. If you have a data service, what are the quality requirements that need to be fulfilled to include it in the EOSC, under the EOSC umbrella. And with this very varying and inhomogeneous landscape, that harmonization of all access policies is challenging, but definition of 2-3 access types to which services could be categorized should be feasible. That is one of the conclusions, and that's also a conclusion for that have been discussed in the work previously. Other things that came up in this Tallinn workshop were around the barriers. So the policy on the network layer, there was one, for example, there could be a specific issue if we now there are procured commercial cloud providers, for example, that get the Xi'an connectivity. It could be an issue then to transfer data over Xi'an to between two commercial providers over Xi'an. And I mean, it's a kind of an example where there could be this kind of policy issues that need to be solved, and the devil is in detail here, of course, when you start to really use and combine these things on a larger scale. And if this is a real issue or just, but it serves as a good example, I think, of something that could be an issue. Agreement must be reached between service providers on kind of information shared about users. When there are these federated identity federations, There is also, of course, information about users that are shared here among service providers, and how do we handle this. And then you have the GDPR coming up here, and that will put new regulations on these things also. So care need to be taken there also, or really understand what are the implications of this. The one important thing that was raised in this Tallinn workshop was also that EOSC should be as inclusive as possible from a service provider point of view. Some input there said that minimum set of principles to be set for all providers, additional set of principles for those who want to go further. So there is a issue there of how to balance this. I mean, be inclusive, but maintain quality and a level of a high service level there. It is a balance that needs to be found. So moving forward here, then, and that some things that will conclusions here of what we are moving forward towards. So there are clear that the principles of engagement of service providers in the various infrastructures, existing ones, some research infrastructures, and the infrastructure are different and adapted to the type of service that they are offering. And it will probably continue to be so. Necessary to integrate the result of EOSCpilot service work package, there where they go looking on specific services. So this is an ongoing work there. It's also in the EOSCpilot here. This is happening. And so next steps here, there will be an examination range of possible principles across all levels and covering different themes here, like we mentioned here previously, the service quality and metrics, to what are the, how can we get some view on the quality here. The terms of use, of course, and inclusion in EOSC service registry, what would be required to get the service into such a registry. This work is done in such way that the people working with this now are running further consultation with the experts of service providers and among service providers and users. Okay, that consultation work, it was one, it has been, as I said before, this scans of and deep interviews with a few service providers. We had the event in Tallinn. There will be an internal workshop now in Brussels, and that is just in project internal, but we have a broad participation in projects that from both service providers and users, so that can be used also. There is the big open event, the EOSC Stakeholder Forum in Brussels. We invite you all to come there, 28-29 November. And then of course, the results will also be disseminated via cluster projects and communities, and that will go on now. So that was just a bit quick look into this kind of principle of engagement work that is needed, one component of the European Open Science Cloud. I mentioned a bit of the results and information we got from the workshop we had in Tallinn, EOSC Governance Development Forum in Tallinn. And that was, of course, also about the governance framework. And I just present some feedback we got there from this workshop on the slide here. Specifically, the European Open Science Cloud governance and the member states was discussed here. So it's clearly that we got from several member states, I mean, that they support the building of EOSC, The declaration is considered to have good topics, and although not, of course, not all member states have an official position yet, but overall seems to be a positive interest there. But more than one member state or many member states are really emphasizing the importance of involvement of member states and associate countries in the governance and decision making of EOSC. So when talking about member states here, it is on the government level then, typically ministries of education and culture and similar. The one question that comes from that level is also, of course, what are the funding models and instruments, so that, and the discussion of that need to be clarified and clarify some of these issues. What are the existing funding streams, and are there any changes to this foreseen, or how is things really going to be funded and happening? That is, of course, the government interest. It is what is called the ERAC, Standing Working Group on Open Science and Innovation. So this is under the European Council, and that is a vehicle for discussions between the European Commission and member states about EOSC. And so this is up for discussion here. And I think they have their next meeting on the 25th of October. It's coming up, where probably governance will be discussed. And they're also, of course, emphasized by the member states, and this goes back to the funding issue here, that one need to have wise use of resources, not duplicating things already done in other initiatives. And of course, when you go to the governments, they also see, are there possibilities to make savings here? Can we find synergies between services provided by different countries and so on? So these kind of questions comes up. On the government level also, there is request for a clear focus from more than one government, clear focus on interoperability on all layers. I mean, policy, organizational, semantic, and technical. So this is typically also how they work with their national systems, research systems, that how do various actors in a research system work together, and it's all these kind of interoperability that goes from policy, organizational, semantic, and technical, and that is really important also for the sustainability, for getting things to work. And we organized this workshop in Tallinn back to back with an ERG meeting. So, and then of course came a discussion on how other bodies here could be interesting or important stakeholders, and like the S3 Forum, ERG, and RDA, and all. It seems to be clear to many how that these kind of organizations and meetings have a clear role in the big EOSC picture. Can play a big important role there. So next events. So this was a bit of the quick conclusions from this Tallinn event. There will be follow a longer write-up from that event. We are now circulating it with the participants that give them a chance to contribute in writing also. And more events will come up, and so we have next events here, and now it's an old slide here. We say that the next webinar, 12th of October, this is today, but next one will be 6th of October, no, 9th of October, yes, 9th of October, I get November, 9th of November. Now we are totally confused. 9th of November is the next webinar. We will announce this properly. There we have, I already talked about the EOSCpilot stakeholder engagement event, and there will also be and that is next year, then a workshop in conjunction with the EU.conference. We will have a first version or a draft of the EOS governance framework. We publish now in beginning of November. The EC plans to establish an interim EOS governance board that seems to be in the roadmap for the EC in beginning of starting 2018, and EOS roadmap that is also prepared by the Commission should be available by the end of the year or beginning of 2018. That are uncertainty in this, but that's for how we understand the European Commission's intentions right now. But thank you for your attention, and hope to see you soon on next webinar, and maybe live in Brussels on the stakeholder meeting. Goodbye.